One clip YouTube sounds. Welcome back, guys, to the Built Different podcast. And today, a little bit of a different one. We actually have our first guest, which is crazy to say, given we're around about 10 episodes in. And it is Mr. Conor Carlson, a very close friend, but also someone who I massively look up into the industry. And in this episode, I want to dig deep into our story of how we got to know each other, but also the mindset shifts he's had to take from going from a fitness professional into the mentoring space. We're going to finish off talking about why are we here in Bali and what have we learned from our first business mastermind. So without further ado, we're going to get straight into it. So Mr. Carlson, welcome to Built Different. Thank you very much for being part of it.
Yes, first guest. That's big.
First guest is big.
Big
Shoes to fill.
Yeah.
So I want to kick off and talk about our story together because we met back in 2021. Just before I moved to Dubai, and you were already here. And then obviously 2022 became friends, and the rest has kind of been history since that point. I think we're very alike in a lot of ways, in the sense, not just what we do in terms of industry, but in terms of the way we conduct ourselves. And, you know, without blowing smoke, I think one of the things that I really like about you is how well you've done in terms of your business, but how grounded you've stayed. You've just actually stayed in a position where you don't think you're too good, like a lot of people see. You know, you earn some money and, you know, your values change. And I think that's a really big thing that I want to kind of kick off and talk about. So the first question would be, moving from a fitness business into a mentorship business, tell me a little bit of the background story behind that and how it came about. And was it about following a passion or was it something else?
Yeah, I think I can't really distinctly remember the exact moment. Like, it wasn't like I just had a moment and said I want to start business coaching. It's probably like a transitionary period I kind of went through. Like, I remember distinctly probably 2020 speaking to a mentor of mine at the time, and I was like, I just want to be the best prep coach. I was like, I want to be known as one of the best. So it's kind of like my ego doing the talking. Then moving to Dubai, getting more of a love for the business side and like the operation side of like how to grow the brand, grow the business. I started to be like, okay, I don't actually care about myself. I care about the business and how can I actually accomplish the best coaching brand possible. And it was a weird kind of moment for me where I was like, I don't hold my value to how people perceive me. I care more about how the business and the brand is being seen, and I have a responsibility to make sure that can be as good as possible. And so I kind of had like a shift in
it wasn't like a single, but it was like a transitional period. I still remember, like, it feels like yesterday when we were sat in a restaurant, and like, you always used to speak more about business than you did about fitness. Because for anyone who's listening, like, you were someone who coached in the business, and then you actually took a step back before you made your business mentoring, and you're actually operating a business to accomplish as more like a CEO role, overseeing the process and actually overseeing the business systems, whilst obviously Kate managed the business. So you'd always kind of had that sort of mentality, hadn't you, of like taking a step back before you helped other people.
I suppose a mentor of mine, Chris, would probably be a lot to do with that kind of transition as well. I remember something he said to me, and he was like, I want to be able one day in my life to be able to be on a yacht in the middle of the ocean, no signal, and that I know my business is running without me. I was like, that's pretty cool. Not that I'd ever do it, but just to think I'd have that freedom. I wanted that freedom.
Is that how you define like fulfillment then? Is like having something that you can take a step back of and it runs hands-free?
Not necessarily, because like I'd say we'll get onto it, but it was almost like what I did with the fitness business, scaling myself out of it and like overseeing the business and having the ability where I could kind of run without me. To answer your question, I think fulfillment for me comes with, are you constantly evolving and are you constantly doing things which is improving the business, improving your kind of role within it, which will allow you to impact more people and lead. So I think that was like the evolution of the fitness business. But if that was just fulfillment for me, I probably would have never started the business coaching, because I was like in a point of view where I was like kind of like did the thing that a lot of people will want. But I think, as you know as well, then you're kind of like, okay, what's the next thing I can be working on?
And I think that was the big thing for me, is like translating the impact from one thing to another. Because for me, certainly, in creating the Coach Crate, it was never about like the financial. It was just genuinely following a passion. And for me, that was about fulfilling a role within the industry that I thought wasn't actually currently sustained. And that was raising the standard of education within the coaching industry via obviously a vehicle of impact, which is essentially like what you said. You know, you've come from an industry and wanted to provide a level of impact. And kind of following on quite nicely, like in terms of mindset shifts, and this is something obviously I love to speak about, what's the biggest mindset lesson, like discipline, resilience, all these types of things and traits that has helped you most in business?
Oof. In terms of mindset shift, I'd say the biggest thing for me, even when I kind of compare myself to other people, are if someone is struggling in terms of business and I speak to them, I think so much of it comes down to limiting belief and probably belief in themselves. And I speak to coaches and they feel bad when it comes to money. They feel like charging someone money, there's like a weird perception, or making a lot of money, they define that as being bad. I think I got to a point where, and this didn't come initially, but when I realized that I was doing a disservice to people if I charged them too little, or if I was too friendly in terms of giving someone like a free pass with coaching or whatever. So I think I got that kind of drilled into me, into my own mind quite early on, that, okay, you have a certain level of standard, you set yourself up in a certain way. So anyone you're leaving in to your world, like, they're lucky to get the ability to communicate with you and speak with you, and you shouldn't ever feel bad for charging for that. And then when you start making money, the belief of, okay, I can see people are actually coming to me, they're getting huge results, I'm making this money, and that was like a knock-on effect. So yeah, I think through the fitness business and through the business coaching, I think having belief in yourself, what you're worth, allows you to show up every day with this kind of like drive and hunger.
Yeah, I think self-belief the key to everything. And I think self-worth, like, people always love the word like self-love, self-think, but it genuinely does come down to self-love a lot of it. And I think if I was to add to that, certainly when it comes to the transitional, for me it would be delayed gratification, because bodybuilding, physique transformation, whatever, you often have to do things in the moment, in the day, with no expectation of immediate reward. You have to follow a process on a long-term horizon to get to where you want to be. And I think that is so true within business. And like, using the example of the Coach Creator, when I was building that, like, there's no immediate signs of success. And I actually believe a prerequisite to like running a successful business is being able to do the thing you know you need to do without the quick dopamine that most people rely on, without the pats on the back, the applause, everyone saying you're going in the right direction. Just being, like you said, so fixated on that mission of what you want to accomplish, irrespective of outcomes, like only focusing on inputs and not outputs. And I think if you can focus on the inputs and irrespective, switch off your emotion to the outputs, I think that for me was what was the biggest shift that I can translate from bodybuilding into business.
I think for myself, you, probably people listening, it's, we just like love the process so much. So like, it was something we wanted to do. Like, some people get into, competing, some people get into business for reasons that aren't the right reasons. Like, I never started fitness coaching because I wanted to make money. I planned to get a job after university. So how I started that was like, I fucking love this. And I want to help other people do it. And even starting business coaching, like, of course, yeah, I'm not saying it wasn't not for the money, but it wasn't for the money. Like, I could have just kept all attention on a fitness business.
For anyone listening, like, I think we spoke about this last night. Like, you were in a position where Accomplish was doing very well. You didn't need to start another business in any way, shape, or form. It was following a passion because you really enjoyed speaking about business in your spare time. I remember you'd speak about business and listen to business, and you'd be, have you read this book? Have you read this podcast? So it kind of came from a place of passion and alignment, as opposed to, oh, that's it, that's quick money, I can charge a lot more for business mentoring as opposed to fitness. Let's give that a go. Like, and I think some people, do go down that path. So I think it's having that distinguishment of your reason why, and like, what is your why behind what you do. And as I said, to start, the why for me is so important, like an alignment. And I think a lot of people will speak about burnout, and I've spoken about this in previous podcasts. Like, people often say, oh, I'm burnt out, like I'm working so hard, so many hours. And I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but certainly for me, if I'm working in a certain path to something that I feel very passionate about and very aligned to, and this was the Coach Creator for me, I generally did 18-hour days for 6 months straight, like, and that's not an exaggeration, not just on Coach Creator, but managing my fitness clients too. And because I was on that path, no matter how many hours I did and how little sleep I operated on, because I felt so aligned and I was so excited to wake up and like continue chasing what I wanted to do, I never really felt burnt out in the same sense. Whereas if I was getting up and going to a 9 to 5 job that I fucking hated, and then I was working after doing another job that I didn't like, I would have felt completely burnt out, and I probably would have burnt my candle at both ends. And I think that's the power of finding your why. Hard work doesn't feel like hard work anymore. And I think that's where you can define hard work very differently. And I think that's, if you actually look at most successful people, one of the really cool things is look at how they define the terminology, because their definition of hard work will be very different to someone else's who has a job that they don't like. The perception will be completely different.
It was even like James at the weekend at the mastermind. He said he only works Tuesdays and Thursdays. Like a big goal for him was freedom and spending time with his family. But then he writes an email every day, and then someone kind of like tried to catch him out, saying, "Oh, I thought you only worked Tuesday and Thursdays," and he's like, "Define work."
Yeah, it's so true, because like, I often get it. I mean, even when we're going out for food last night, like you're like, "Are you done yet?" I'm not working. You're like, what are you doing? Well, I'm replying to clients, but I don't perceive it as work, and that's the thing. It's your perception of these things. So I want to talk about you transitioning into mentoring space and how you had the confidence to do it. And did you feel a level of pressure going into it? Because obviously going into any new business, and this can apply to anyone listening, of thinking about starting a new business, there's a perceived level of pressure. There's the fear of the unknown, should we say. Did you feel that pressure?
Yes, definitely. I always backed myself in terms of like getting results, even though I had no evidence, because it would have been the first time I did it. I just knew what I knew would work, and I knew I would care and give a really good service, and I knew the way I'd set up deliverables, so I was confident on all those aspects. But I even said it to you the other day, like I remember my first one-to-one mentoring call. It was probably at like 2 p.m, let's say, that day. I remember going to the mall, like nothing else mattered. I probably took a rest day from the gym, went to the mall at 9 a.m. and was like, hey, I need to make sure I have everything ready for the call. And just kind of like literally went into for like that. And that's kind of like what we are speaking about, which I think is really important. It's sometimes people will deepen the deliverables of what they're doing, or their
paralysis
offer.
analysis.
Yeah. And instead of doing that, I was like, okay, obviously, like I did put things in place, but there was a degree of like, okay, geez, someone's booked in for a call today.
Make it as you go along, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing I like speaking about this. There's two components I want to talk about here, is confidence, and obviously me and you agree on this, and obviously it's come from Alex Mosley. Building confidence is actually a very easy skill to do when you actually systemize the process. Like all confidence is the likelihood of what you think will happen happening. And the reason you can be certain of a certain outcome is because, like we always say, you've built a stack of evidence, and you might not have done that evidence with existing mentees, but you've done that working under other mentors, and you've selected and cherry picked from working all of these different mentors all the parts that work. So that is your stack of evidence to say, I know if I implement this with these people, this is going to work. So I think that's probably why you went into it with an element of confidence.
And it's actually interesting, just when you were saying that, I was thinking, some people can be quite like arrogant, and I would always consider myself, or hope at least people see me as like the opposite, and like quite humble, but I was always very, very assured of myself and confident. But I almost think I've always, in terms of like the work I've done in myself in the years in the gym, how I started the fitness business in terms of getting client results, I nearly always relied heavily on, which is a good thing, obviously, really good service delivery to get really good results, really good client feedback. Because I wasn't delulu thinking I was like this great person that some people think there. Yeah. I was like, I don't actually think that. I know I could be, and I know I have like the heart and to be that person. But let me make sure I'm receiving that feedback, so that builds my confidence, because I know I don't really have that kind of like some people pull it off really well. Like, and I always, funnily enough, think there's a difference between Ireland and the UK. I think guys from England are a lot more confident than guys from Ireland. That's
really?
Something I've noticed. And even like competing, like I remember going over to the UK to compete, like WBFF.
WWE.
Yeah, WWE. maybe the wrestling. WBFF. Yeah. And I remember going over, and like some of the English lads, and I was like impressive. I was like, I just couldn't. So I think that was probably the way I was in a lot of areas. But at the same time, that never meant I lacked confidence, because I always ensured I got confidence from
the confidence was coming from the right place as well. Yeah, because you'd created the evidence, and like you'd invested in the mentors, and you'd learned from the best people, so you knew it was going to work, and you had proof it had worked in your own business, and you'd scaled your own business. So I think that's probably why you had an element of confidence. And the other thing, I was circling back to what you said as well about the paralysis analysis, because obviously this is something I've gone through recently. And obviously we'll touch on it when we talk about the mastermind thing. I think for me, and I've done an episode on this in the podcast, and I want to know your thoughts on it. Like, it's people label themselves as perfectionists, and often it's just procrastination in disguise. And it's so clear.
Mm.
People like the label. Oh, I'm just perfecting. You know, I'm just making sure everything's perfect before I do X, before I launch, or before I take the next step, or do the thing that I know I need to do. They're not. No, you're just putting it off in a polite way. And I think the real key to all of this is being directionally correct. So like if you have a North Star that you are working towards, and that is perfect alignment, that's the perfect path you can take in the most efficient route. People are always looking to take that path. In reality, you're never going to take it. There's no perfect, doesn't even exist. You know what I mean? It's not, it's a fake thing. So like if you can just be directionally correct, just aim to go in that direction. You know, as long as you're not going this way, just aim to be directionally correct. Go in that direction, review why you weren't perfect, iterate the process, review it again, and then go again and do it. And it's just a feedback loop. And I think, yeah, it's having the ability to have a thought and implement it fast. And I've obviously spoke to you about Think and Grow Rich, and it's one of the most common traits of successful people is shrinking that gap between thought and action, between having a good thought and putting it in place and action it, reviewing it, and then going again. And like the faster you can shrink that gap, the further you will get ahead. So I think that's a great lesson for anyone listening. Like if you have something, obviously I'm not saying make just rash decisions and just think of something and fucking go and do it. Obviously there's got to be a level of thought process and initiative behind it. But yeah, sometimes you just got to back yourself. And I think that again ties really intrinsically into confidence. You are confident in yourself. You can execute without overthinking the process, because paralysis analysis is a thing. So apologies. Go back. What you're gonna ask me a question?
Well, just even on that note, like even taking it back to like being in university, I used to sometimes feel almost there'd be other people in my class, and we'd be getting ready for a presentation, and I just feel they'd be putting in like so much work, and it would almost like frighten me a bit. Geez, like am I not doing enough? I was like, I felt prepared, but now I almost don't.
Do you remember before you go into like GCSEs? I don't know what you call them that in Ireland. And before, like, everyone's got the books out, and like people will ask you a question, you're like, I didn't know that topic was on it. And then you go in there and you'd be fine, but like it's that initial thing, and everyone's reading the books. I'm like, oh, you read about that? I'm like, no, I've not even heard about that. Where was I?
So true. Yeah, I remember I would wake up to study in the morning, but I was like, once I leave if I was in an apartment in university, I'm not looking at a book again. Like everything's prepared.
Man, I was on the school bus, reading my book, highlighting my notes, literally queuing up into the sports hall where we'd do tests, and I'd be reading my notes like every bit, and I was like, none of this is going in. But I did very well in my stuff. I was a geek at school.
Yeah, I suppose just to kind of ask you the same question with you kind of moving more into like helping the coaches space. Like I'm just gonna answer for you a bit, because I think this is probably the way you feel, even if you haven't thought about it, because it was almost the way I felt as well. When I was doing fitness coaching, I coached a lot of coaches, so it wasn't like completely, even though it's different, I was like, I still felt I had like the authority to like guide a business owner and a coach, even if it was on a physique level. So I'd say it was the same for you, because I know you coach a lot of.
Yeah, I mean, initially that's exactly how I got into the coaching space. So, sorry, not the coaching space, like the mentoring, whatever you want to call it, space, educational. I had probably for the last maybe 2 years, 18 months, I've been coaching PTs, online coaches, and I've been asked numerous times, would you think about, mentoring me? Would you think about it? And I always said, you know what? No, I'm not going to do it, because unfortunately I don't have the time, and I don't want to dilute my service. I need to uphold the level of service standard that I'm going to have with my existing client base. And then the more and more time went by, I was like, it started to like subconsciously ingrain that like I can do this, and I'm doing it. And I was almost doing it for free for people in my thing anyway. Just like they'd ask me a question, and I'd enjoy helping them, because at the end of the day, I've got the experience to help them. And that's all teaching was. But I always toyed with the idea of mentoring itself, like purely like more so what you do. And this is where like I guess there's a contrast for people listening here. Like you're obviously more in the mentoring space of financially helping people increase the revenue and obviously increase the business. For me, I've created the Coach Creator more around that happens as a byproduct of becoming a good coach, like educating coaches within the industry to become the most effective coaches, understanding client psychology, understanding training and nutrition on a deeper level, understanding everything. Like, yeah, I do teach sales, marketing, but also from like a value perspective, giving as much value as you can for your content and for your sales processes. So yeah, going back to your question, like I had confidence in what I could do because I'm educating people, and I know I'm a geek. I'm a fucking geek when it comes to training nutrition. So I knew that I had that. But just like you were saying, there was an element of, who am I to do this? Like, who am I to coach other people? Who am I to educate? What qualifications have I got? Like, yeah, I've got loads of experience, and that gives me confidence because I've put the reps in, I've put years of effort in, I've done my research, but who am I to do it? And that took, like, to put it in perspective, 12 months ago, the person that I once was wouldn't have been able to do what I'm doing now. I wouldn't run a podcast. I wouldn't have built the Coach Correct because I wasn't internally confident enough. And that took a lot of self-development and self-work. Have you ever had to do? I think you've actually been pretty mentally stable compared to me. I've had to fight demons and sit in 3-degree water to face my battles. Whereas I think you've just been level-headed. You just cracked on. Like I had to have like a 6-month period of working on myself before I actually took on new challenges.
Do you know what? I think you actually explaining on the working on yourself would actually be really beneficial for people watching or listening, and even myself. Because I think, you know, a lot of times it's like, oh, you'll hear people say like, I had to work on myself, and maybe people are listening being like, I kind of want to do a bit of that. But like, if you were to dive deeper into maybe a few things that you did that could get that internal confidence that allowed you to start the podcast, allow you to build a second business.
Yeah, of course. And this is something amazing to talk about. And obviously, I could do a full episode on this kind of thing. But I guess for me, like, it didn't come from, I asked myself a question and all of a sudden I was like, I need to work on myself. Mm-hmm. It came from reading a book, and obviously I've told the story about why I've got Manifest as a sleeve, and I've actually done an episode of like a book review on it. So I'm not going to go into that. But I think the step one which Manifest gave me above anything was self-awareness. I think anyone who's looking to work on themselves, you have to be self-aware. And this goes for anything in life, not just personal development, but if you want to fix something with your business, if you want to fix something personal-wise, if you're not making progress in your physique, what is the problem? What is the bottleneck of your progression? And I believe in the theory of constraint. You know, there's something will only grow as much until there's a bottleneck, and then you have to fix that thing before it grows more. And I recognized that I was the bottleneck. That's the thing. I became self-aware enough. So I think, yeah, if you were to go back to the start to work on yourself, self-awareness of what is wrong with me and what do I need to work on becomes the initial step.
Would you say it's like taking, so I always speak about this, like taking responsibility of, like, you know, if something is in a certain way in your life, just
100%.
Like, and then it's nearly like if someone's listening and they're not in the place that they want to be, whether it's with their physique, with their business, instead of just thinking about what it is, being like, what area of myself could I improve to improve this? Even if that's not going to be the main thing that moves the needle, that's probably the only thing you have in your control.
Yeah, it's control the controllable. Once you have that realization that you can only control what you can control, and once you also have the realization that you've got to give up the victim mentality. Everyone in the 21st century has a victim mentality. They don't want to take responsibility. There's always someone else you can blame. There's always a situation you can blame. I'm this way because of him or because of her. I feel this way because years ago I, did this, or this happened to me. This happened when I was a child. Like, I get it. It's, it's all traumatizing. It's all ingrained with our subconscious mind. But there comes a point in time where you have to just give it up. And the moment that penny drops, where you're like, I can only control the controllable. And this is the crazy part that I think people don't understand. It's like, if you can't control your own mind, then who is? Like, that means you're not controlling your destiny, essentially. Like, you're basically telling me, if you said to me, I can't control things, like I just blame everything else and anyone else, I don't really take responsibility for something. Okay, let's elaborate on that. Let's take that to the next step. You are therefore telling me you don't control your future. You don't control your happiness. You don't control your fulfillment. Your external surroundings do. And I don't know whether you're happy about that, but to me, that's a huge problem. And that's the way I perceive it. Like, that's a huge problem if you can't take responsibility. So that's the way I look at responsibility. Like, I think it's so important that everything you do, no matter how bad the situation is. And there's a funny story I listened to. Are you familiar with Jocko, the motivational speaker?
You've sang it a few times.
Yeah. Was he in the Marines? I don't want to do him a disservice. He was very high up in the military, like commander, like unbelievable, successful.
Yeah, sorry.
And obviously he speaks very, very motivationally.
Yeah.
And I remember him telling a story specifically, and I don't want to butcher the story, but let's just like put it in context. There was a mission that he had, and for whatever reason, he couldn't complete the mission because there was, I don't know, it was a huge storm or the weather conditions were awful and they couldn't land or take off a plane or something like that. Something completely out of his control. And he just said, I'll take control of that. Like, I should have planned and put a plan in place if the weather was poor. Like, and very few people will do that. People, how easy would it have been for him to just say, I can't control the weather?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But it's having the ability of any situation, doesn't matter how good or bad it is, you can still have an element of control over everything. I think if you have that perception of life, you'll always learn in every situation as well, which I think is important. So let's kind of move on to the reason we're in Bali after all. The mastermind. So a little bit of a backstory about this. So it's a funny one, really. So I have obviously built the Coach Creator. I am looking to expand it further. I'm looking to expand my business knowledge and all this kind of stuff. And I came across a guy's page called Darren Lee, who's based in Bali, who's running a business mastermind. Really great guy. And I followed him, come across one of his ads, and I thought, you know what, like, this guy really good. He specializes in long form content, YouTube, podcast, and how to basically create better content in long form, which I've got no experience with. Like, this is my first podcast with a guest. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm winging it. I'm making it up as we go along.
Winging it.
So yeah, in that sense, like, I was like, I really buy into this guy. And obviously it's very easy for smoke and mirrors on social media. And there was one person who had a mutual friend, and it was Conor. So Conor was the mutual friend of Darren. And I was also following a female creator called Laura Costa, and she was on social media as well. And I come across one of her ads, and she was one of the most successful in the recent years. I think the most successful female on LinkedIn in terms of growing her account via personal branding. And I believe two of the biggest things to help grow an audience, grow a business in the next probably half of the decade revolves around those two things. I think it's around personal brand, and I think long form content, because people have huge inherent trust issues. And I think you can't hide behind a podcast. Like me and you now, if someone watched this to this point, you know exactly what we're about by this point. Like, it's not a 60-second reel or a carousel with a fake caption that ChatGPT's made. Like, it's, you know, it's real. It's there's no hiding. So I think to build trust and build a business, I think there's a huge shift now, which is changing, certainly since probably 2020, towards long form content and towards personal branding. So anyway, that's the backstory. So this is the reason I wanted to attend the mastermind, but I had trust issues, as we all do. So I sent it to Conor, and I sent Darren's profile, and he said, "Oh, I went to school with this guy, and funnily enough, I actually coached him through his first bodybuilding prep, and I was actually on his podcast very when it started in 2020, which was crazy." And then I was like, "Oh, I really want to go," and I couldn't go because I didn't have anyone to look after the dog at home. Like, Chai needs looking after. It was very late notice. Lives in the UK doing a team shoot, so I had no one to look after him. And out of fucking sheer coincidence, I messaged my videographer, who's based in the UK. Maybe travels to the UK travels to Dubai once or twice a year, maybe at a push. And she was like, "Oh yeah, I'm coming in May." And I was like, "Oh, let's try it. What are the chances? Like, maybe it's the same week." She was landing the same day I was leaving for the exact same week.
Mad.
And I was like, the one guy that I want to go to is mastermind, and also obviously sort dog care, child care. She's my child at the end of the day. So I sent Conor the profile, and he was like, "Yeah, this guy, you know, he's a really, really good guy." So I said, "Fuck it. Do you want to go?"
I don't think you even asked me. I think I replied.
No, I didn't. I just said, "Yeah."
I was like, you're kind of tempting me here, because I was kind of similar to you in wanting to. I think, like, being in the fitness space, it's always good to get outside it. And sometimes, like, something I've said a lot this weekend has been like ignorance debt. And it's almost like I don't really know, because there's a lot of people, as you said, you see online, and I've heard people pay like 20K for programs and say like, "Oh, it was crap," or like mastermind, say it went to that. And you're like, "Okay, so if I want to like learn from someone outside the fitness industry, it's not just if they built a big business and they're a big name, because it could be like shit on the inside." So it was like finding someone outside of that industry, and me knowing him on a personal level, that I had the trust there and know he'd deliver a good day. So it worked really well.
So yeah, and I mean, obviously both me and you, I mean, we've invested 100K in mentors over the years. I think
I don't actually know the
the number. I think I worked out when I was marketing the Coach Creator. I think I've invested over 50K over the last 5 years in mentors, something like that. So yeah, we both put a lot of investment, and we both value education, mentoring, learning from people who have been there, got the t-shirt, walked the walk before we have. And I think it's the best way to learn, because at the end of the day, it's like the biggest hack in life. Like, people are afraid to invest because it's like we paid X amount of money, to go to this mastermind, which, was relatively expensive, a few £1,000s, like it wasn't cheap, but we value the return of investment of that. And I think that's what a lot of people misunderestimate is if you invest in something, it's not like you're buying a fucking pair of trainers, like there's going to give you no return. Like your skills, your knowledge, your mindset are the only things that compound over time in life. And I think if you can really understand that ROI that's going to give you, not just, now in the immediate, but like you keep them skills for the rest of your life. You keep that new knowledge, that new mindset, and also the new connections that we obviously created there as well with loads of great people. So that's why I'm so passionate about, educating.
Yeah, I think for anyone listening, like probably if you are listening to this, you do want to develop in different areas of your life. And I understand that investments can be scary, but I think the way that I love to say it is when you think about an investment, if you get a financial number, is it going to be a stress investment or a stretch investment? So for all of us, a different financial amount will actually be a stress investment where if you invested that amount, either logistically it's not feasible, or two, you'd be like, I would pay you this, but I'd really be seeing if I could actually afford my bills and like do a food job.
Yeah.
If you ever feel that about investment, like it's not the right time for you to invest into that. You should never feel like that huge amount of stress. However, the other time it's going to be a stretch investment. So it's a lot of money, but it's something that you could do, is feasible for you. And if you did it, because it's a lot of money, it's something you'd put a lot of time, energy, and you take it seriously. So even when people are on a sales call with me and they say, that's expensive, I'm like, I'm actually happy you think it's expensive. All my best clients who come through my program also thought it was like expensive.
You value it. It's human nature. Like if you think, oh God, like you pay for something, you're gonna do it. You're gonna follow it through. And we often speak about this because if you invest in a service from, like you said, the place of stress, the place of scarcity, I've used every one of my last dollars to invest in this. If it doesn't work out, what am I gonna do? You're coming into the program from a wrong perspective where like you're banking on it working. If it doesn't, then you're screwed. You're not going to be able to pay your bills.
Yeah,
wrong place to be investing from. So yeah, we went to the mastermind. Obviously, we're recording this on Tuesday. The mastermind was over 3 days, so it was Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And to give people perspective, so Darren was the main guy who ran it. A beautiful villa in Bali. It was an unbelievable place when it was amazing, great food, unbelievable hosting. Went out for meals, in the evening. It was
great guests,
great host, yeah,
and guests like other attendees.
Yeah, great group of people, which were part of his program, which was part of OX, and he had some great guest speakers as well. Obviously, just helped layer, obviously the learning, I guess. So there was Lara who obviously spoke a lot about content, mainly LinkedIn, but actually it was really useful for any content creator of any level. There's obviously James Camp, who is slightly older, I think 40 plus, and obviously got a wealth of experience within the sort of the industry. Then obviously there's Tom as well, who's come from a teaching background, and I really found that useful because understanding how people learn, like I love to understand the psychology of how people learn, because what we are doing as mentors is educating people. And I think if you can help educate people, that's your real superpower. And when it comes to education, like I always use like a flow chart to explain it. And I do this in the course. It's if you educate people, what that allows them to do is assign meaning to the task that they're doing. And if you assign meaning to a task you're doing, what then happens? You carry out that task to a higher degree of actually a higher standard, because you're like, that's important. I'm going to do that better because that's what you do. And what happens when you execute at a higher standard? You get better results. So it's like education just equals better results in my eyes. So I want to very quickly break it down to obviously lessons learned. If we break it down, and I think the best way to do is, because I could go on for a long period of time of the lessons that we've learned, but let's do it very quickly. Quickest lesson or best lesson from Darren, from Lara, from James, from Tom.
Okay.
So 4 lessons.
From Darren, for me, actually, the biggest lesson I learned was how we actually conducted the day on Friday.
Yes.
So I actually did an in-person event in January. We'll be doing another one this year. And so me going to the mastermind, it was also kind of like a selfish reason of, I want to see how he conducts this, because I want my next mastermind to be better. So I thought, took a lot from that. This kind of like goes into, I think, okay, story, like if I was just to give one word, or I suppose that's 2 words, but like one kind of main topic from the weekend, like storytelling.
Yeah.
So storytelling in your content, storytelling.
That's one word, I think.
What?
It doesn't matter.
Kind of story telling.
I'm being pedantic. Go on.
What would that be, like a double barrel?
Just go on.
So yeah.
Storytelling.
So not only is storytelling so for people watching it, if you're producing content, obviously the power of storytelling, which will actually be one of my biggest take homes from Lara, but also as a presenter, storytelling. So what he did on a Friday was going through around the room, talking through people's biggest problems and also like their biggest kind of success in business. So with that, everyone was kind of telling their own story. So we're learning from each individual case, but without them even realizing it, they're all just telling their stories of what business they have, where they are, and like you were learning a lot about people in a small amount of time.
To put it into context, people listening, like we were sat in a room, obviously down and go through us one by one money. So I've got a course creation product, like you're mentoring. Mm-hmm. There's a guy that gives like relationship advice. There's a guy that does like a gambling thing from Australia. People from all different walks of life, different industries. And just obviously telling our stories was really powerful because we learned from each other, which I think was amazing. But it made it so much more interactive the way he ran the mastermind, because it was a Q&A forum, but there was just lessons embedded with everything. Yeah. Like some people would be struggling with lead generation, some people would be struggling with marketing, sales. So it allowed us to just kind of dig deep into each of the individual components.
The other thing that I liked was level of directness about like, this is just the way you have to do it. So sometimes I think as coaches, people could come with you with an issue and you may be like, okay, I know what they should be doing, but I've said that to them 3 times. So let me come up with like a big alternative to try help them with. Yeah. But it's like, no, just keep reminding them to do the fucking thing. And if they're not doing the thing, just say it again and be like, why the hell aren't you doing the thing? And that's something I'd even be guilty of. I know someone would be like lacking on an input that I know is really valuable. And I know there's something that's holding them back from doing it. And instead of me pushing them and being direct and like, do the thing, I'd be like, oh, will we just try this instead? And it's like me trying to always give my best service in a way of like, not pleasing the client, but you know what I'm saying? So probably having that level of directness, being like, what is the biggest constraint? And let's just
it's like in fitness content as well. Fitness coaching. Exactly the same principle. It's like I always say the same line over again. I am not making changes to your plan to make up for a lack of adherence on your behalf. Go and do the thing I said. If it doesn't work, then I'll change it. Like very simple, but like often we'll sugarcoat because we're trying to overcompensate. Yeah. Lara, I think we can both agree. I would say SLAY framework, which for anyone listening is how to conduct a caption. Well, you know what? It's not just a caption. It's a post. If that's LinkedIn, whether you're creating a VSL, whether you're creating any type of post or caption. And the SLAY framework was basically an acronym she likes to use, which is quite fitting for her character as well.
I think we need to come up with a more masculine name.
Yeah, no, this is what it is. So it's story. Tell a story to start with as the hook, so it engages people, for personal branding reasons. Give a lesson, so the L is give a lesson. So what actually lesson did you learn from X story? Then give her something actionable for the audience actually to use, because inherently, whenever we consume content, we're doing it for our own benefit. Like that's the reason we consume content, because we want value ourselves. And then relate it back to yourself. So make you feel like obviously the authority, and you could include a CTA in there as well. So that was actually really good. Like even in the last couple of days, I've used that framework in the last couple of posts, and that already, my engagement has actually got better on my captions, which just uploading some training clips. And I'm like, I've used that framework of storytelling of how my training's evolved, as opposed to going, this is me doing a dumbbell press. Do you know what I mean? It's crazy. And it really does work. So simple, so effective. Then obviously we've got James. What did you learn most from James? I mean, I've got, well, I think the main teaching point, if we're on the same wavelength.
You go for it.
Yeah, I think we'll probably agree, because we haven't spoke about it, is the amount of offers you can create from one single product. So obviously for you, like you got your one-on-one mentoring, and now it's kind of sort of a penny drop moment that you can create maybe a group mentoring for people who maybe can't afford the one-to-one mentoring, and it drops them in, and how you can actually still give such a high level of service in a group setting. And then people can then ascend up to one-to-one once they've got the result and they've got the money, because you've given them the leverage to do so. And obviously from me, from the coach creator standpoint, it's having now the understanding that I can create multiple products from the course itself. For me, that was a huge eye opener, because it's so true. Like in this day and age where we are right now, we're in an attention deficit. Everyone's fighting for attention, and it's like we're always looking to get new leads. And often if you've got a large client base, like you can monetize that client base better. And I don't mean just that in, oh, let's just make more money off the people we're working with. But it's like, how can you give more value and give different service offerings to the people that you work them with? And how can you actually start them on something more affordable and build them up and you grow with them and increase that lifetime value? That was a huge one for me. That was probably one of the biggest penny drop moments. And like, it sounds very simple, but it's like, yeah, utilize what you've got. Don't just always look for new. Like sometimes there's a famous story of a homeless person, and he was always begging for money. And someone said to him, have you ever looked under that box? And he looked under the box and it's full of cash. And it's like, sometimes you're looking for that next thing and the only thing you need is right in front of you all the time. And I think that was for me like the real penny drop moment.
Yeah, I think just with like having a lot of offers, what's important to add is if you're, let's say, on a sales call, not to have all the offers presented, because that will create some like decision fatigue with the person. And what I thought was interesting that he said was sometimes actually starting with like the lower price product. So he would have an element that was 1-to-1, but if he didn't think the person necessarily needed it, and let's say on the call they said, oh, I thought I'd have a bit more support with you, and they're like, oh, there is an option where you actually do have more support, it's this. So starting on the lower one and having confidence inside your program that you can ascend, so you can kind of like upsell them onto to another program. So yeah, I did like the ascension when people come in. Also, he said something on timelines that, like, I think this will be relevant to each business, but what he found from a timeline perspective to get people in, having his offer at like 3 months worked the best. And he trialed like 12 months, 6 months, 3 months. He felt to get that kind of commitment in where people don't feel like they're committing for too long. And he had the confidence then once people are inside the program that they can
to extend. And
I think something that people can kind of go away.
It just comes down to like human psychology.
100%. And I think something people listening can take away from this, if you're a fitness coach and people are joining your program, I'd always think about what's the next problem that they'll have after you solve it. So if let's say you're a fat loss coach primarily, when you help a client go through dropping body fat, they'll probably be at a point of like, okay,
how do I sustain it?
Yeah. One, how do I sustain it? Or like, two, oh, I don't want to just like stay where I am. I've never thought about building muscle, but now I want to. So can you create programs on the back end that increases? Like I always use the example that probably you and me will have been through with clients where someone comes in for lifestyle transformation, they look sick. And I'm like, oh, have you ever considered a photo shoot? And they're like, oh, geez, do you think I'd be ready? I'm
like, they have the confidence and it's,
and we're like, we have this like photo shoot prep package we can go for here. Then they do a photo shoot and it's either another photo shoot or maybe it's going to onto competing. So it's like having things in the back end where you're always future pacing in terms of like what that thing is. Even let's say for you and I, if I was helping you with your course, and let's say we did sales calls and we're just trying to ramp it up, and I knew you were taking all the sales calls, and if I had confidence that, okay, I know Joe's gonna get so busy with calls that he's not gonna be able to take them all, do I have my own closers that I can place in the business? So when Joe messages me and say, hey, like calls are getting a bit overwhelming, I'm like, oh, do you want a closer? I actually have one. It's X amount per month. So it's like I was planning
proactive, not reactive. 100%. Tom's final lessons. So obviously he's come from a teaching background, education. What was your biggest takeaway from his stuff?
I think that actually the biggest thing for Tom that I took away, which was really, really interesting, he put a belief in me of the ability to where a group program can be high value and having that in. And I think, and also even saying that you could potentially be doing your clients a disservice for giving them too much of your time, because if they have you all access to you all the time, they'll become over reliant on you. And that was something I really took away. So for me, it's me going away and wanting to keep the one-to-one elements that I have with my business and with clients, but how can I build it in a certain way where they get to the point where they have the one-to-one when they need it, but they're also creating this independence where they're not going to have an over-reliance to me. They're also getting benefits from a group community that I experienced this weekend where they're hearing from different people in the lessons. And it's like combining all that from kind of evolving from me just feeling like I have to be one-to-one, and that's the main.
I think the huge thing as well with group that they drew upon as well is that community vibe. Like in 2025, like everyone craves community, craves connection because we're so disconnected as a society. So having an element of group connection, because there's such a huge disconnect in the world, I think group settings are actually incredibly valuable. And I think as well, like you said, it actually allows people to think on their feet and actually use their own initiative, which I think is invaluable. I think, one-on-one services and group have got the place in at a certain point in time. But I do think people often misconstrued value when it comes to mentoring or services. with how much time am I speaking to this person. Like, you could speak to someone for 10 hours and not get any value. Like, it's the ability, and I think that's where experience comes in. It's value per second. And I actually think sometimes shorter amounts of things said that actually move the needle. You know, it's the 80-20 rule. For anyone who's familiar with the Pareto principle, it's understanding from your experience, because you have experience in a certain sector. These are the highest value impact tasks that will move things forward. So I, as a mentor, can see what you're doing with your business. I understand whether it's from a mental capacity, a strategy standpoint, or a business standpoint. These are the items that are going to move your business further forward. And I think that's what value should be based upon, not just, oh, he's given me an hour of time today. It's how much value is he giving me in terms of what is going to move my business forward. So I think people often get that misconstrued, which just leads me on to the kind of final point to wrap up now. Is often, I think, people look in the wrong places. And this is something that I'm really passionate about, and it kind of ties in quite nicely with like what Built Different is all about for me. Is often entrepreneurs, online business owners, obviously for us, more coaches in the fitness space, we often look for the next best strategy, the next best funnel, the best next ad, you know, the best system, or whatever you want to call it. And often for me, the reason that people aren't getting to where they want to be is because they're operating from a place of scarcity, a mindset of, you know, lack, of misalignment, of being unconfident, of second guessing every step they take. And I think if you can instill that confidence and that mindset within someone, that will catapult you forward further than any other thing that, you know, is possible when it comes to strategy. So I think that's the real like unlock for me, of being around such a like-minded group of people, and people are ahead of me, is not realizing they've got these magical frameworks and strategies. Like, yeah, there is some really cool things that they're doing, but really, like, they've just got the self-belief and experience. And I think being immersed around people like that for me was absolutely invaluable. So I think that was the kind of wrap up for me of like the whole experience, is realizing that it's not just strategy. I think mindset is one of the biggest things. And how do you get to that mindset? Surround yourself with people on that same page. 100%. So yeah, thank you very much for being the first guest. I actually really, really enjoyed that. I had some crazy topics, very, very different things. We spoke about relationships, we spoke about mindset, we spoke about the mastermind, self-efficacy, all weird and wonderful things. But very much appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you, bro.
First episode wraps up of the Built Different podcast. So just before we end, where can people find you, Conor?
Yeah, so if you're actually watching this on YouTube, I do have a YouTube channel that you can check out. I will be getting more consistent with personal uploads, because right now, if you look at it, it will be everything with clients of mine, so case studies and things that I've been through. So if you're interested of kind of seeing how I work with clients, I want some inspirational fitness coaches who scale their business, definitely check that out. Or on Instagram as well. Type in Conor Carlson, you'll probably find me. But one N, not two N's with Conor.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Cheers, bro.
I'm going to enjoy our rest of our time in Bali.
Thanks, bro.